5 people you must avoid in old age, even if they're family. I'm 70 years old. I've buried friends. I've buried relatives. I've closed 40 years of work behind me, and I've watched entire decades disappear like smoke through an open window. At this age, you stop pretending. You stop dressing pain up in elegant words. You start calling things by their name, because time no longer feels infinite. Every morning I wake up and I know that the years ahead of me are fewer than the years behind me. And once you truly understand that, something inside you changes forever. You stop wasting your breath on things that don't deserve it. And that's exactly why tonight I want to tell you about 5 kinds of people you have to keep away from in old age, even if they're family, even if you've known them your whole life, even if the distance hurts, and believe me, it does hurt. Because at a certain point, peace matters more than approval. There are people who steal your calm without ever raising their voice. They don't need to shout. They don't need to threaten. They simply sit beside you quietly, patiently, and take a little piece of your serenity every single time you meet. And the cruelest part is that at first they don't look dangerous at all. Some look like love. Some look like family. Some look like duty. And duty is the hardest mask to see through, because we were all taught that duty is sacred. But time reveals the pattern if you're honest enough to look at it. So let me tell you about the 5 I had to pull away from, not as theory, not as something I read in a book, but in the order I actually learned them through the real consequences they left in my life, in my body, in my sleep. I'll start with the one that took me longest to understand, because it wore the face of someone I loved. The first is the manipulator. You don't see it coming, because manipulation doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives dressed as urgency, as emotion, as a fake sense of duty. It arrives disguised as need. For me, it was someone I loved deeply, someone who always seemed one step from collapse, always standing at the edge of some invisible cliff. Every phone call carried pressure before a single word was even spoken. I could feel it in the ring of the telephone itself. Every request sounded like the last chance on earth. There was always a problem only I could fix. And the moment I hesitated, even for a second, the tone shifted. Disappointment, fear, guilt, delivered so gently that I almost didn't notice the blade underneath it. I stopped noticing that the decisions weren't mine anymore. I was reacting, not choosing, and there is no dignity in a life spent only reacting. And the trap was this. Every time I helped, I felt a relief for an hour, maybe 2, and then the next emergency arrived right on schedule, as if it had been waiting for me to exhale. My life was being measured by someone else's instability, and I didn't even notice I had handed over the measuring stick. It took me far too long, decades really, to understand that love does not mean surrendering your own balance. Love that costs you your peace is not love. It is a debt dressed up in tenderness. When I finally pulled back, I didn't do it with anger. I didn't slam any doors. I simply stopped rescuing on demand. I learned to pause before answering. I learned to say no without a speech attached to it, without justifying myself for hours afterward. And strangely, that silence changed everything. Not immediately. Nothing important ever happens immediately. But slowly the pressure lifted, and I started breathing again, really breathing. The way you breathe when you finally take off a coat that was 2 sizes too small. The second one arrived differently, and in some ways it was quieter and more insidious. After years of that pressure, I met what I now call the self-centered narcissist. He doesn't ask you for anything, and that's what makes him so easy to underestimate. He simply never sees you. Every conversation curves back to him, always, no matter where it starts. You could tell him the sky was falling, and within 30 seconds he would find a way to make it about the weather he once survived. At first I thought it was just his character, a harmless quirk, something to smile about with other people. But over time I noticed something eroding quietly inside me, like water finding a crack in stone. I would share something that mattered, a fear, a hope, a small victory, and watch it get pushed aside, buried under his own stories, his own suffering, his own triumphs. Even my accomplishments turned into background noise in his endless monologue. I remember sitting with someone very close to me, someone I had known for years, and realizing halfway through the conversation that he hadn't asked me one real question in longer than I could remember. Not one. It wasn't dramatic. There was no scene, no raised voices. It was just clear, the way cold water is clear. I was disappearing inside my own relationships, becoming a spectator in the story of my own life. So I made small changes, the kind nobody else notices at first. I shortened the conversations. I stopped waiting for a recognition that was never coming, because waiting for it was its own kind of exhaustion. I started reclaiming space, not with aggression, with firmness, the way you reclaim a chair that was always yours. If I was interrupted, I kept talking anyway, calmly, without apology. At first it felt like breaking a rule, an old unspoken rule I had never agreed to but had followed my whole life. Then I understood. That rule was never mutual to begin with. It was only ever binding on me. The third arrived quietly, but it left the deepest mark of all. Deeper even than I expected. The critic. He never raises his voice and is always convinced he's helping you. That's exactly what makes him so hard to spot, so hard to defend yourself against. His words come disguised as advice, as concern, as the wisdom of experience, wrapped in a tone so reasonable you almost thank him for it. But the outcome never changes. You start doubting yourself quietly, piece by piece. In my life it showed up in small remarks, the kind that seemed too minor to even mention out loud. How I lived, how I dressed, how I kept my house, how I chose to spend the days after I stopped working, as if retirement required his approval too. Nothing was ever quite good enough in his eyes. After an entire life spent building order and stability for myself, brick by brick, I still found myself at first absorbing those words in silence, nodding, saying nothing. Then later, alone, I would replay them at night, lying in the dark, wondering if maybe he was right, if maybe I really had gotten it all wrong. That is the real damage of the constant critic. He doesn't break you all at once. With one blow, he slowly rewrites how you see yourself. One small comment at a time, until you no longer recognize your own reflection. Until one day, almost by accident, I understood something essential. Not every opinion deserves a seat inside you. You are not obligated to host every voice that speaks. Some words are just noise, even when they come from a familiar voice, even when they come from blood. So I stopped defending every choice I made. I stopped explaining my life as if I owed anyone proof of it, as if I were still a student handing in homework. I simply acknowledged what was said, a nod, a brief word, and kept walking in my own direction without turning back to check if he approved. And I watched almost with surprise. The weight of those opinions loosened its grip on me, little by little, until one day I realized I hadn't thought about his comments in weeks. Then there's the Irresponsible One, and this is the one that cost me the most sleep. These are people who move through life leaving disorder behind them wherever they go. Missed payments, broken promises, one crisis after another, always someone else's fault, and somehow they always expect someone else to clean it up quietly, without complaint. Old people are easy targets for this, because the young assume that whoever has more years also has more time, more patience, more resources to give, as if age were a bottomless well. In reality, they see us as a safety net, not as human beings who simply want to live out their remaining time in peace, in their own home, with their own routines intact. I learned this through my grandson, Daniel. He wasn't a bad boy at heart, lazy, yes, careless, yes, but charming enough, warm enough, that people kept giving him one more chance and then another. Job after job, and every time something went wrong, he had an explanation ready, polished, almost rehearsed. The boss was unfair, the economy was bad, his co-workers were jealous of him, never, ever his fault. Then one winter he asked to stay with me. Temporary, he said, with that smile of his. That word has trapped more old people than you'd imagine, more than any lie ever could, because it sounds so small, so reasonable. At first it looked harmless. He'd help around the house, find work, save a little money, and be gone in a month or two. That was the plan, or so I was told. But the weeks turned into months, the way they always do. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink. My expenses grew without my noticing at first. My quiet habits, the ones I had built carefully over years of living alone, vanished as one after another, replaced by his noise, his mess, his hours that never matched mine. I started waking up irritated in my own home, my own sanctuary, and that irritation frightened me more than anything else, because I had never felt that way inside my own walls. One afternoon I came back from a doctor's appointment and found him asleep on the couch at 3 in the afternoon. Empty beer bottles lined up on the table beside him like little soldiers. While that same morning I had sat alone in a waiting room, worrying about my blood pressure and a possible change to my heart medication, worrying in silence because there was no one there to worry with me. And in that moment, a thought crossed my mind, almost painful in its clarity. I was living out the final stretch of my life, carrying a grown man who wouldn't even carry himself. That hurt more than I can tell you, because my generation was raised on endurance, help family, sacrifice in silence, keep giving even when exhausted, even when there's nothing left to give. But there is a vast difference between helping someone through hardship and feeding a pattern that never changes, that only grows heavier the longer you carry it. So one evening I sat Daniel down at the kitchen table and told him calmly, without theatrics, that he had 30 days to leave the house. No shouting, no cruelty, no long speech, just clarity, delivered once and not repeated. He was surprised, then hurt, then angry, the way people always are when the truth finally arrives. But inside I knew I had already waited too long, months too long, maybe years. When he left, the house was mine again. Silence came back. The good kind of silence, not the empty kind. Peace came back. Even my health improved. My blood pressure steadied, because at this age, stress does far more damage to the body than most people are willing to admit. And no doctor can prescribe you out of a house full of someone else's chaos. And this brings me to the fifth, the last, and in some ways the most quietly devastating. The ungrateful one. It sounds less serious than manipulation, less serious than constant criticism, almost too small to name as a real wound. But ingratitude, over time, leaves the deepest mark of all on a human heart, because it doesn't attack you, it simply harasses you. When you give sincerely your entire life, freely, without keeping score, and what you give is always taken for granted, at some point you start to feel almost invisible, as if you were furniture rather than a person. Ungrateful people rarely know how to give a true, heartfelt thank you, the kind that actually reaches you. Nothing is ever enough for them, no matter how much you offer. If you offer your time, they notice only what you didn't do. If you lend a hand, they find fault in how you did it, some small detail to correct. If you sacrifice for them, they treat it as your natural duty, something owed rather than given. And after years within that dynamic, even the most genuine generosity slowly begins to turn into exhaustion, and then eventually into a quiet resentment you never wanted to feel. I think of a woman from a group in my neighborhood. I'll call her Eleanor. Every Christmas I would drive some of the older residents around town to see the holiday lights, because many of them could no longer drive safely at night. And it did something good in me, something warm, to see their faces light up like children again for a moment, even briefly. I did it gladly, with real pleasure, expecting nothing in return. But Eleanor always found something to say. Too cold, too crowded, too slow, wrong neighborhood, the restaurant not suitable afterward. Once I even organized a small dinner for the whole group, working on it for almost 6 hours. The shopping, the cooking, the setting of the table just right. In the end, the only comment I got from her was that mashed potatoes were too dry. I remember driving home that night with a strange feeling settling over me. It wasn't real anger, nothing so sharp. It was something quieter, an emotional fatigue that seeped into my bones, and somewhere along the drive I understood something important. Gratitude is like oxygen for the soul. Human beings need to feel appreciated the same way a plant needs light, especially as they grow older, because old age already carries with it a certain sense of distance from the world, a quiet fading from other people's attention. Many elderly people feel set aside, almost no longer considered, as if they had already begun to disappear before their time. In that context, a simple thank you, said sincerely, can warm the heart more than one might imagine. It can restore dignity, presence, worth, all at once in just a few words. After that experience with Eleanor, I stopped going out of my way for those who treated kindness as something owed to them. I learned to reduce my emotional effort toward those who didn't know how to recognize it, and I began investing my energy only in relationships where respect and care moved in both directions. Life became lighter this way, noticeably lighter, as if I had set down something heavy I didn't even know I was carrying. You know, when you're young, you think life is mostly a race. Career, children, mortgage, goals to reach, milestones to chase, one after another without ever stopping to look around. But when you reach old age, everything shifts perspective quietly and completely. Peace becomes wealth. Quiet mornings become a privilege, not a given. An afternoon without stress is worth more than any impression left on others, more than any achievement you once thought would define you. And the people you keep close become the most important thing of all, because they can either support you or slowly consume you from within. And there is no middle ground that leaves no trace. There is no neutral relationship, not really, not at this age. I don't feel hatred toward the people I've talked about tonight. I truly don't, and I want you to believe that, because this isn't about anger. Many of them probably carried wounds inside that I never fully knew, that I never had the chance to understand. But age teaches you something essential, something no one tells you when you're young. Compassion doesn't mean giving unlimited access to your life. You can love someone and at the same time protect yourself from what hurts you. Those two things are not opposites, even though we are taught they are. It took me almost 80 years to understand this truth, 80 years to learn something that should perhaps be taught much earlier. And if there's someone in your life who often leaves you with anxiety, exhaustion, guilt, invisibility, or a strange sense of always being less than who you are, then don't ignore those signals any longer. Don't explain them away one more time. At our age, peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity as essential as any medicine in the cabinet. Protect the time you have left. Protect your heart. Protect even the small, quiet joys that still manage to give you a reason to smile. A cup of coffee in silence. a walk with no destination, a conversation that asks nothing of you but your presence. And if no one has told you this recently, let me tell you.